Good afternoon, all. Welcome to another session of In Dialogue Foundation Certificate Course in Dialogue Study 2023-24. I'm Charu Damor, a volunteer at In Dialogue Foundation. I was also a part of this course in the batch 2021 and 22. Today, we have the pleasure of having Professor Mrinal Miri and Professor Bindu Puri, who will join us after some time. They will speak on their latest book, Gandhi for the 21st Century, Religion, Morality and Politics. Mrinal Miri is one of India's foremost educationist, philosopher, and thinker. He was awarded Padma Bhushan by President of India for his contribution to the field of education and literature. He has also been a member of Rajya Sabha of the Indian Parliament. We welcome you, sir. I'm giving a little brief about Professor Bindu Puri, who shall join us after some time. So Professor Bindu Puri was a professor at the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi, and is currently a professor of modern Indian philosophy at Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Miri, you will have up to 2 hours for this session, and you may leave as much time for questions and discussion as you like. The floor is yours, and you can begin.
Thank you very much, Charu, and I thank India for inviting me to be part of this event. I've been with you once before, and this is my second time with you. I am supposed to be talking about the book that's been recently published, authored by Bindu Puri and myself. It's not a book jointly written in the sense that we write every sentence together of the book. It is more like sharing the authorship of the book in the sense that Bindu Puri has written 3 chapters of the book independently by herself, and I have written the rest of the 3 chapters. The book consists of 6 chapters of the book, again, independently. So, but then the book is not quite kind of, disparate as I might have suggested. There are lots of common points and common, if I may also say, common even arguments. But we do our thing in our own way. Our styles are different, and we approach problems in somewhat different ways. But we meet, in the course of our argumentations, we meet quite frequently in the course of the book at different points, on different issues that we may be discussing. So Bindu, I think, when she comes, she will make these things much clearer than I'm able to do at the moment. But what I would like to do is, I cannot obviously discuss the entire book. I'd like to discuss a very, what I consider in my contribution to the book, what I consider to be very, very, very important issue in Gandhian thought. And this is, the issue is about, what should I say, about morality. You cannot really separate Gandhi and morality. Gandhi did not talk about morality in a distant kind of way. He did not stand there and watched morality being practiced right out there. But as he said, towards the end of his life, somebody asked him, "What is your message, really?" He says, "My message is my life." This is something about the totality, about the total involvement of Gandhi in whatever he said or did. I think that is extremely important. Now, about morality, and there are many things that I can say about Gandhi's views on morality, but it is best to limit myself to a few issues. And one of the issues that Gandhi was really very, very insistent on was the issue of temporality of morality. And Gandhi's temporality, the notion of temporality is very extremely important. Gandhi thought that the present tense, past tense, future tense that we talk about, the stream of time, as it were, the arrow of time. It goes from the past to the present to the future, that they are all connected. Scientists will say they are connected by causal laws. But Gandhi said for morality, we must distance ourselves from both the past and the future. The present is the center of morality. You cannot understand morality without having located it firmly, resolutely in the center. So that is one thing that I shall talk about. And the second thing that I shall talk about is, again, the crucial place of the body in understanding human action. The body, the human body. I think Gandhi considered the human body, unlike many others, particularly in the West, that the human body is absolutely central to our understanding of ourselves, to our understanding of action, all action, moral as well as other kinds of action. So the crucial place of the human body in understanding human action, that is, and the impact that it has on our understanding of morality. That's the second thing I shall talk about. The third thing I shall talk about is the idea of freedom. Gandhi's idea of freedom. Gandhi's idea of freedom, it was very, very, very very, very distinct. It is very different from the idea of freedom that we are familiar with, the kind of liberal, democratic idea of freedom. Gandhi's idea of freedom was very different from this. So that, and following from this, I shall end by a final word about the merger of the moral with the mystical. So this is the general pattern of what I am going to say this afternoon to you. Now, the importance of the present. Why did Gandhi think that the present is central to our understanding of what it is to be moral? The future is unknown. The future is unknown, or at least uncertain. Future is, we don't know the future, or although astrologers claim that we know the future, we don't know the future. The scientists make predictions, but they're very careful to say that our predictions are fallible, that they can go wrong. So we don't really know the future. And therefore, if it is unknown and also uncertain, future is certainly uncertain. If we don't know it, the future, then it is uncertain. If it is uncertain, then as far as our actions are concerned and our aims, the aims of our actions are concerned, if they're aimed at the future, as many of our actions, most of our actions are aimed at the future, they cannot exclude, the future cannot exclude violence. Now, violence, Gandhi was completely opposed to violence as far as moral thought is concerned. Non-violence is the central principle of morality that I shall come to. So, if the future is uncertain and the future is unknown, not quite known, then you cannot say that the future will not contain violence, that the future will not exclude violence. Then, apart from the fact that if the future cannot exclude violence, then obviously the morality of action aimed at the future is suspicious, because it may include violence. Any action that includes violence, whether aimed at the future or at something present, that is not to be considered as moral. However, apart from the fact that action aimed at a future end must always allow for the possibility of violence, it always involves tacitly or openly the idea of calculation or even manipulation, because it requires the efficient or not so efficient removal of foreseen and unforeseen obstacles. I mean, if it is in the future, obviously you don't know what you're likely to encounter in the course of fulfilling the goal of your action. There might therefore be various different kinds of obstacles to overcome in the course of the fulfillment of the goal of your action. And these obstacles may be of very different kinds. These obstacles may be different people. People are opposed to your action, so you have to deal with that. And then this may be physical. It may involve, opening up a huge kind of, say, tunnel by bombing a hill. And that's an obstacle. You want to build a tunnel, the hill comes in the way, you have to bomb it so that the tunnel can be dug through. So this is another kind of obstacle, physical obstacle. So there can be also psychological obstacles of various kinds. But there's therefore always a shadow of unfreedom. If there are obstacles, you have to overcome them, then to the extent that you need to overcome them, to that extent you're unfree. Therefore, always a shadow of unfreedom in such action. What then for Gandhi is the arena of the moral? Gandhi is therefore strictly opposed to, if the future is taken out, is strictly opposed to utilitarianism in all its variety, because for the utilitarian, it is the future that ultimately determines whether an action has been moral one. The moral man, says Gandhi, I quote him, intends nothing to serve other ends, unquote. The here and now of an action is the proper object of moral approbation or disapproval, not ends that may be in the future. I quote, his is a lame truthfulness who speaks truth as a matter of policy, because policy is always directed at the future, as a matter of policy, but he who is untruthful in his thoughts will act aright, though he is dumb. So Gandhi says, you see, actions must not be policy-driven. Policy-driven actions are aimed at the future, and therefore they are suspicious in ways that all actions aimed at the future are suspicious. And so thinking of truth as a matter of policy is powerfully reminiscent of the utilitarian principle of honesty is the best policy. For Gandhi, morality must involve a disengagement from matters of policy in human affairs. Obviously, this seems to run entirely against the central tenor of modern politics. It is all policy-driven. Party politics, liberal democratic politics is all policy-driven. It is all what is it called? They're manifesto-driven. What is manifesto? Manifesto, delineates all the things that you're going to achieve in the future, in the next 5 years. So we might ask, is Gandhi relevant to politics at all? Therefore, if politics is always policy-driven, especially liberal politics, policy-driven, then is Gandhi relevant to politics at all? Might not there be a misunderstanding involved in the modern politicians taking Gandhi's name in justification of a policy of his for the future of humanity? But although Gandhi was very, very firmly, resolutely against considering moral actions aimed at the future, considering actions aimed at the future as capable of being moral, politicians, policy-driven politicians, policy-driven political parties, policy-driven politics as such, in our country, every party takes the name of Gandhi. Then how can Gandhi's name be taken if Gandhi is arguing for a policy mukt, a policy independent action of policy independent activity, policy independent human conduct. Now, so what are we to say about these politicians? These politicians are either ignorant of what Gandhi said, or they are not really ignorant. They know what Gandhi said. They know that Gandhi's philosophy, Gandhi's moral philosophy was entirely opposed to policy-driven actions. They still take the name of Gandhi in justification of their policies. So, and if they're ignorant of Gandhi, it's all right. But even if they're ignorant of Gandhi, they ought not to have taken Gandhi's name. But they may quite well know. Obviously, I think many politicians would know that this was central to Gandhi's model. So therefore, if they know of the central tenet of Gandhi's philosophy, and yet try to use Gandhi in support of their policy-driven actions, then there is a kind of hypocrisy involved in this. Are politicians hypocrites? Well, many of us would say that hypocrisy is part of politics. But anyway, don't let me go on discussing politicians and Gandhi, but there is an oddity in politics, in politicians, particularly liberal democratic politicians, using Gandhi in justification for what they say and do. Now, the second point, the body is very important. The second, say something, Gandhi and Tolstoy, Gandhi knew, he didn't personally know, he never met Tolstoy, but he wrote to Tolstoy because he had read some of Tolstoy's works, and Tolstoy wrote back to him. They developed a friendship between Tolstoy and Gandhi. There was a lot of correspondence between Tolstoy and Gandhi. It is very interesting that independently of each other, Tolstoy, in his very extremely radical kind of interpretation of the Bible, says about the centrality of the present, of the unimportance of either the future or the past as far as the morality of your action goes. This is what he says. This present life in time is the food of the true life. Then he says, and therefore the true life is outside time. It is in the present. If I have the time, I shall talk about existence being outside time. Now, thirdly, he says, time is an illusion in life. The life of the past and the future clouds men from the true life of the present. And therefore, one must aim to destroy the deception arising from the past and the future, the life in time. The true life is that now present to us, common to all, is now present to us, common to all, and manifesting itself in love. That's very important. Gandhi's word for love is non-violence. Of course, he uses the word love also. He even says love is the positive manifestation of non-violence. So that is Tolstoy and Gandhi about the present, about the importance of the present. Now, I'm talking about the body. Now, when you think about Western history of Western philosophy, well, almost as far as you want to go back, the mind-body duality picture of human being, it has been there in the Western tradition for as long as you can think of. Now, it seems now at present, this duality has been given a decent and sometimes not so decent burial in the 20th century Western philosophical thinking. It is the person who wills, intends, and decides, etc. And the person is the same as the human body, seen as having a certain kind of dynamic or organic unity. This organic, dynamic unity, all kinds of living beings have. The trees have, animals have, and the human beings also have. But this dynamic unity in the case of human beings is incredibly more complex than in the case of animals or trees. So it is the person who wills, but in the case of animals and trees, we don't want to think about their life being split into a tree mind and a tree body, or an animal mind and animal body. We think of them as bodies, but we should also think of human beings as basically bodies, organic bodies. This is Western philosophy at present. It is the person who wills, intends, and decides. It's the person, the body. And the person is the same as the human body, seen as having a certain kind of dynamic, organic unity. It took Western tradition to come to this position, many centuries of domination by the mind-body duality doctrine. Now, it is strange to, isn't it? I mean, you think of, the mind as a kind of, as Descartes thought, it's a kind of very strange kind of thing, which is somehow, implanted or somehow, implanted in the body by, we don't know whom, but Descartes would say by God, implanted in the body. And this thing is kind of drives the body as a kind of a driver drives a motor car. It's a very strange kind of picture of the person that most of Western philosophy had. Now, India's ancient and abidingly influential Shankar philosophy was quite clear that the mind is not an entity independent or separate from the body. It is an instrument or organ of the body. The living human body has, among other things, the sense organs, which are the source of sense perception, the organs of action, such as the arms and the legs, and the physical complex of manas, that is the mind. It is the body which has this physical complex. Buddhi is the intellect. And the ahamkara. Ahamkara is the ego. That's very important. That ahamkara is the ego. The living body is sarira, and the dead body is sava. But the sava, dead body, remains a sarira until the last rites preceding the cremation are performed, are completed. Homeric Greeks had a similar conception of the living body. I can do no better than quote here Bernard Williams, one of the most brilliant philosophers of our time. In the course of his very keen arguments to free the Homeric conception of man from the grasp of the deep-rooted mind-body duality metaphysics of modern Western scholars of ancient Greece, Williams writes, when at the very end of the poem, that's Iliad, Homer's poem Iliad, some of you might have heard about it, in one of the most moving scenes, Priam sets out to recover his, Priam is the king of Troy. Priam sets out to recover his son's body from Achilles. He asks his companion, who is in fact the god Hermes. So, Priam, this is Priam. Whether my son still lies beside the ships, or whether by now he has been hewn limb from limb and thrown before the dogs by Achilles, Hermes is able to tell him that although Achilles has abused it, dragging it around Patroclus's tomb, the body is miraculously neither damaged nor corrupted. So it is that the blessed immortals care for your son, though he is nothing but a corpse, because in their hearts they loved him. In wanting Hector's body to be whole, Priam, the father, wanted Hector to be as he was alive. The wholeness of the corpse, the wholeness that Priam wanted, was not something acquired only in death. It was the wholeness of Hector, the person. But the living human is also Purusha. It is masculine. But in a wider sense, must be taken as including the feminine. Purusha is the living human being, as in the Purusharthas. The proper Purusharthas are the proper ends of humankind. But Purusha most crucially is also the pure consciousness, which is referred to as the Atman. The Atman is beyond human cognizance, cannot be captured in the language of time and space, or truth and falsehood. It can only be realized, in quotes. But such realization, Atman can only be realized, but such realization can come only as we reach a stage of existence which is beyond the I, the ego, ahamkara. Only if we have reached a state of existence which is beyond the I, we have kind of thrown away the I, thrown away the ego, which is an impossible thing to imagine for ordinary human beings, which is part of the living Sarira. The Gita says of the Atman, this is Gandhi, unmanifest, avyakta, he, unmanifest he, unthinkable, achinta, he. It is clear that even a minimal description, such as the preceding, is already in danger of being caught up in logical oddities. I mean, to think of something as unmanifest and, as achinta and avyakta. I mean, how do you think of something as a Chintana Bhakta and talk about it? It must involve logical oddities of various kinds. It is best, I think, to follow here Wittgenstein's adage. I quote, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. One cannot, it is unthinkable, therefore it cannot be spoken about. Therefore one must be silent about it. One cannot go on talking about it. You will only talk nonsense then. Or this is the point where philosophy must give way to poetry or music. Gandhi's expression of the predicament is as follows. I quote, in truth, the Atman does nothing, nor does it cause anything to be done, because it is not involved in action. But something must be said of the use of the pronoun I. It cannot obviously refer to the Atman because the Atman is not an agent. The I cannot refer to the Atman. The Atman is not the agent. It is the manas. It is the ego which is the agent. The only other thing that it can possibly refer to is the sarira, but it can the body, but it cannot refer to the sarira either, because the I, as it were, sets itself up apart from the body. For instance, when I say I am hungry, it is hunger is an attribute of the body, and I is different from the body, because I cannot say I am hungry unless I am the same as the hunger. I'm writing an essay on life. Supposing when I say I am writing an essay on life, I distinguish I from the action of writing and so on. Interestingly, in recent Western philosophy, a view has been advocated to the effect that I is not a referring expression at all. It is a pronoun, as it were, by courtesy. It doesn't refer to anything. It is a pronoun like I, you, he. They refer to things. I doesn't refer to anything, according to this strand of thinking in the West. In Sankhya philosophy, however, I is indeed a referring expression, and it refers neither to the sarira nor to the Atman, but to the ahamkara, roughly translated as the ego, which is part of the physical complex, the other parts of which are manas and buddhi. And the ego is a powerful self-aggrandizer and motivator of morally dubious actions. The centrality of the human body in Gandhi's thinking, particularly his thinking about morality, has therefore deep roots in the Indian philosophical tradition. The living body and a person is the inescapable site of action. So much about the body. But to get to more specifics, I think a good way to consider the involvement of the body in our thinking about ethical matters is to begin by thinking about the idea of freedom. Gandhi agrees that one of the chief characteristics of ethical action is that they are free. But free in a sense very different from the way the idea of free action is commonly understood. In this latter way of understanding, a free action is one that proceeds from the agent's will and performed without coercion, physical or psychological, on the will. Let us take the following examples of unfree actions according to this way of thinking. For instance, physical coercion as the source of unfreedom. Physical coercion includes force applied from outside, e.g., for instance, one person leans on me. I'm standing on a queue to get into the bus. So the person pushes me from the back, and I stumble against the person in front and hurt him. Am I responsible for it or not? This is physical coercion. Gandhi would not regard such an event as an action at all. This is not an action. This is not an action of mind. This is a kind of physical force being applied to me, about which I can't do anything. Such an event as an action at all, and in this he would be in agreement with his opponents. Then, secondly, and this is much more important, security forces extracting confession from an innocent person by torture, psychological or physical, is a cause of unfreedom, unfree action owing to coercion. Gandhi would be doubtful about the unfreedom assumed to be involved in such an action because there is available to the agent a counter force which would make the action totally unnecessary. The counter force is the force of the satyagrahi. In this context, Gandhi's view on the predicament of the Jews in Germany of the Second World War is noteworthy. Gandhi said that the Jews should have accepted total acceptance of non-violence. And the last word, I have a long quote here. I'll let you have the last word. So he prescribed non-violence, non-violent resistance to them. If one Jew or all Jews, I quote Gandhi, all Jews were to accept the prescription here offered, he or they cannot be worse off than now. And suffering, that is when they're being driven to the gas chambers. And suffering voluntarily undergone will bring them an inner strength and joy which no number of resolutions of sympathy passed in the world outside Germany can. Indeed, even if Britain, France, and America were to declare hostilities against Germany, they can bring no inner joy, no inner strength. The calculated violence of Hitler may even result in general massacre of the Jews, which indeed it did, by way of his first answer to the declaration of such hostilities. But if the Jewish mind could be prepared for voluntarily suffering, even the massacre I have imagined could be turned into a day of thanksgiving and joy that Jehovah had wrought deliverance of the race even at the hands of the tyrant. Now, quite a few very distinguished European thinkers who were contemporaries of Gandhi wrote in opposition to Gandhi's views on the Jewish question, including the philosopher, you might have heard about her, Hannah Arendt. But none of these compared with the stark power of Gandhi's statement, which must have seemed to them to have come from a very different form of life and mode of thinking. Obviously, it came from a very different form of life and mode of thinking. Now, another case of unfreedom, the third case of unfreedom that I shall consider, is the most interesting case, that of psychological coercion, which includes brainwashing. The case of the death-embracing terrorist, for example, the suicide bomber, who has been programmed, as it were, to perform his act of terror, is one might think, fearless, just as the Satyagrahi is fearless. In truth, however, the latter's fearlessness is ethically the opposite of the Satyagrahi's fearlessness. The Satyagrahi's fearlessness includes the unconditional gift of fearlessness to the opponent in the true spirit of ahimsa. He is not only in himself fearless, but he must also gift fearlessness to his opponent. Unless his opponent is fearless about him and about himself, then there is no satyagraha possible. The satyagraha's fearlessness includes the unconditional gift of fearlessness to the opponent in the true spirit of ahimsa. The terrorist inspires terror in his prospective victims, quite radically the opposite of the satyagraha's gift of fearlessness to his or her opponent. But the question we are asking is the suicide bomber's action free? And therefore, is he accountable for it? I think it is pertinent here to consider Gandhi's intriguing examples, and this is again extremely intriguing, of the slave and his or her actions done in unflinching compliance to the master's words and actions of the child, actions of the child done in unquestioning obedience to its parents. Gandhi regarded the slave's actions as paradigmatic examples of virtuous action. Why? There are two aspects of the slave's behavior. One is his or her unquestioning obedience to the master, and the other is the absence of attachment to the fruits of his or her actions. So his actions are totally confined to the present, no fruit of his actions, no utilitarianism here. Your right is to work and not to expect the fruit. That is what the slave owner says to the slave. Then again he says, mind your work, but beware lest you pluck a fruit from the garden. Unquote. The two aspects are, of course, inalienably related. The slave's action is strikingly reminiscent of the unreasoned devotion of the faithful and all his or her actions that come forth from this devotion. Think of Mirabai. Unreasoned devotion, totally unreasoned devotion of the faithful and his or her actions that come forth from this devotion. But on the slave's devotion to his master, Gandhi, of course, adds, I quote, the relationship between the slave owner and his slave is an unhealthy one. It is based on the owner's, the master's self-interest. The self-interest necessarily casts its shadow on the slave's actions and detracts from their virtue, thereby making them unhealthy as well. Gandhi's point of the slave example is primarily to draw our attention to the totally unencumbered, this is the important thing, totally unencumbered, spontaneous flow of his or her actions. The spontaneity ensures his or her detachment from the fruits of his or her action. The example of the child's behavior brings it out clearly. Once the child is totally absorbed is totally absorbed or has internalized its parents' instructions, its activities take on a completely spontaneous, playful character. I quote Gandhi, a child who lives in this manner is a brahmachari, is a celibate, a muni, a saint, a sthita pragya. Spontaneity of action also suggests unpremeditated, free of any calculation of consequences, therefore done without consideration of the future. Morality, therefore, is independent of future happenings. So this is, now, lastly, I would like to, I said that I'll say something about the merger of the moral with the mystical. And this, I make this point as really a remark about the idea of truth with a big T, capital T, and knowledge. The remark is strictly not part of the book, but is part of another that I'm struggling to write, a book on Gandhi, Tagore, and Wittgenstein. It would be interesting to reflect on what the nihilist, I quote, in quote, sneer quotes, Nietzsche had to say about truth and divinity. It is still a metaphysical faith upon which our faith in science rests. Even we knowers today, we godless anti-metaphysicians, still trade our fire too from the flame lit by the 1,000-year-old faith, the Christian faith, which was also Plato's faith, that God is truth, that truth is divine. Now, science, Nietzsche, of course, everything, all intellectual activity was scientific for Nietzsche. So everything is included in science, but it is important that modern science which of course distinguishes itself from other kinds of intellectual activities like um, literature, what we call now history, sociology, philosophy, and so on. It is interesting that science also agrees that, on reflection, scientists agree that their view is very similar to the view of Nietzsche. That is, that they can never achieve the truth. And this is quite clear in their declaration that every scientific principle must be capable of being falsified. If it is not capable of being falsified, it cannot be scientific. So, therefore, the truth is never achievable. It must always be capable of being falsified. So, any principle which claims to be true must be capable of being falsified. So, it seems that there is an agreement between what Nietzsche says about truth and modern science. Nietzsche here uses almost Gandhi's language. That is, that truth is divine. That Plato's faith, that God is truth, the truth is divine. Nietzsche here uses almost Gandhi's language, but of course Gandhi would say that it is not just a 1,000-year-old faith, but groundless faith in truth that makes knowledge possible at all. Gandhi left science alone. Tagore had a great admiration for science. Gandhi never bothered very much about science. Tagore had a great admiration. He was not a scientist, great admiration for science. And Wittgenstein was profoundly skeptical about science, its method, and its claims about pursuit of truth. But the knowledge in some absolute sense that mattered to all three of them is the knowledge of, for want of a better word, God, or perhaps truth. As Gandhi thought, knowledge that is the gift of faith, totally uncluttered faith in truth with a capital T, in Nietzschean sense. Wittgenstein was profoundly touched by Tagore's play, The King of the Dark Chambers. Dissatisfied with Tagore's translation of the play, Wittgenstein did his own translation into modern German. When Sudarshana, the queen, asks Surangama, the utterly flawlessly faithful servant, reminiscent of Gandhi's slave, how did the knowledge of the king dawn on you? Surangama replies, a day came when all the rebel in me knew itself beaten, and then my whole nature bowed down in humble resignation in the dust. And then I saw that he was incomparable in beauty, and he was in terror. I was saved. I was rescued. Wittgenstein, this is the end of the quote. This is Wittgenstein's translation. Wittgenstein's translation of Tagore might fruitfully be read in conjunction with his lectures on religious belief. For in the passages he translated, Tagore expresses his own religious belief. That is like Surangama, Wittgenstein did not wish to see God or find reason for his existence. He thought if he could overcome himself, if a day came when his whole nature bowed down in humble resignation in the dust, then God would, as it were, come to him. He would then have seen the light of knowledge and be saved. And this is of a piece with what Gandhi thought about utter humility, complete freedom, and selflessness and nonviolence, and spontaneity of virtuous action that flowed from it is the way of enlightenment and liberation. Thank you very much.
We can take the questions. Tulika, we can start with you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So first of all, I feel very lucky to attend this class right now. So I have multiple questions. First one is, in the beginning of the session, you mentioned that Gandhi was not a staunch believer or a propagator of utilitarianism, if I'm not. Mostly because he says that the morality of action is something that should be about being or maybe focusing in our present. But there's a very famous teachings, or maybe like there's this thing called Sarvodaya. I mean, which I guess means the same concept of
Well-being
utilitarianism.
of all.
Sorry,
It
sir.
is well-being of all.
Well-being of all, exactly. So how is it different from utilitarianism, like where we demand the maximum good for maximum people and well-being for all? How are these two? Matlab, thing is, sir, this somehow contradicts Gandhi's philosophy, his own philosophy. Second question, sir. Um when he talks about ego, that is ahamkar. So, is this somehow related to Sigmund Freud's the three forms of ego, ego and superego? I mean, what does his ego, which he says that the I-ness basically that we have to let go, that we are supposed to dissolve it. So, is the ego part of ego and superego the I-ness that Gandhi is talking about? And third and most important question is, sir, uh, fruitless action. So you just mentioned about fruitless action. So even in Gita, it has been mentioned Nishkam Karma. But I am very much skeptical about this because, sir, everything that I do and everything that people who I am surrounded by they do is somehow related to, or there's a presupposition of the fruit of that action. So I just want you to mention one action that is fruitless and that you follow, and then we could uh, follow that. Yeah.
Well, let me begin with the last one. Action which is that there cannot be any action which is not aimed at a fruit. It's distinct from the action fruit in the future. Now, obviously, this is not the case. I mean, you think of what we call virtuous actions. The virtues are being helpful, being generous, giving gifts, being kind. Now think of the virtue of helpfulness. You're helpful to another person. Now, you see, you can be helpful because you want that person in the future to be helpful to you, or you want some other fruit from him, as it were. Now, is this really help that you are giving? It is not help. It is you are trading your help with something that you. So it is not really help. Help is not helping somebody is not trading with that person for something else. Helping is, as it were, suo motu. It stands by itself. And similarly, think of giving something to another person. Gift. We give gifts, but of course, most gifts nowadays are gifts because there are also return gifts. If you go to a birthday party, you give gifts and you take a return gift. And if you don't get a return gift, you can be very angry. You are, of course, disappointed, but you can also be angry at a return gift. Then email, but a return gift now is a gift. Can a gift be a gift if it is given in the expectation of a return for something? And this is also a trade, isn't it? You're trading your. Well, I took the example of virtues. The virtues are kind of self-luminous in the sense that they cannot be justified in terms of the fruits that they bring to you, that bring to your benefit, as it were. So it is in this sense that morality, and if virtues are the kind of substance of morality. I mean, you know Gandhi's famous, his favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Janato. He talks about the virtues and says that the virtues are really ends in themselves. If they are not regarded as ends in themselves, they're not virtues at all. This is Gandhi's view of actions being, you said that there are no actions at all which are capable of being separated from their fruits. Obviously, the Gandhi's view would be that if your actions are always such that they are never separable from the fruits of their action, then you have no inkling about what it is to be moral and what it is to be not to be moral. So that is his view. Then about ego. Ego, did you say that the ego is not something that can be discarded? That can be what Gandhi said. You must be capable of sacrificing the ego, self-sacrifice. Sacrificing the ego is the sacrificing of the self, because the Atman is not the self. You cannot sacrifice the Atman. The self is the ego. You can sacrifice the ego, and without sacrificing the ego, you cannot achieve morality, as it were. And then, thirdly, the well-being of all. I mean, Gandhi did not really. I mean, he talked about the well-being of the last person. You must think of the last person. And the last, if you are able to achieve, if you are able to help him to, as it were, to achieve humanity, then you are okay. You don't have to do any other kind of action of benevolence. Now, Gandhi did not quite. I don't think benevolence, well-being of the next person, well-being of all, is a total benevolence. That is not. I don't think Gandhi thought very highly of the idea of benevolence at all. Benevolence in the sense of thinking of the well-being of everybody, all humanity. You cannot possibly think of the well-being of all humanity. I mean, for instance, it is true. I mean, is it the same for you to think of saving a person who is now in danger of being, caught in the flame, being burned? Is that is the most kind of pressing moral need for you at the moment? That's what, and it is not somebody who's in a similar situation 2,000 miles away. I mean, that is not a moral. So, it's a well-being of everybody is something that you cannot think about, really. It is not possible to articulate the idea of well-being of everybody. Sarvodaya is an ideal which I cannot really, in truth, pursue with any degree of consistency and any degree of certainty which is required for morality, any degree of certainty. So that would be my view of, and I don't know whether you think this is right. Benevolence for Gandhi is not a virtue. Kindness is a virtue. Benevolence, doing good to others, is not. This is not doing. It is not something that one can even imagine being able to do, situated as you are in the present at this moment. You cannot. This is not something that is even imaginable. Sorry. So next.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sorry, I didn't probably satisfy you. So
yes, we can go ahead with the next question. 9.
Hello, sir. Thank you for your enlightening discussion. And in Afghanistan, we love Gandhi and we praise him. It's a long time that I had the question with myself and to be asked about it, that you discussed Gandhi's deep connection with religion in your book. How do you see his interpretation of Hinduism and his respect for other faiths contributing to religious tolerance and understanding in our increasingly diverse world?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important question, and it will take me, to be able to answer you adequately. It will take me a long time, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. Which is, you see, Gandhi thought of religion. You might say that Gandhi very importantly distinguished between religious culture and religion. And he said every religion is embedded in a culture. And people, of course, say that no, religion need not necessarily be embedded in a culture. A religion can be transported from one culture to another without making any difference to the religion itself. But Gandhi did believe that the religions are embedded in cultures, and this is a belief that has to be taken, as seriously as Gandhi did. So, religious cultures. Now, culture is a human construct. It's made by men. Culture is made by men. And therefore, whatever is made by men is capable of change, capable of being transformed. It is capable of being asked very serious questions, as different kinds of very serious questions asked, say, again, about Hinduism or about Islam or about Christianity. So cultures can change. Cultures can be questioned. Because they are temporal. Now, although religious cultures can change, can be questioned. I mean, you can think of Hinduism itself has undergone so many, especially in the last 200 years or so. Hinduism has undergone enormous amount of change. Hindu culture, if you like, Sanatana Dharma, has undergone enormous amounts of change. And that doesn't mean that Hinduism is gone. So this has to be distinguished from the core of religion. That's what Gandhi believed. That is, he said that there is a religion which lives in every religion. A religion which lives in every religion. And that is something which is unchangeable, which is beyond time, which is eternal. And that religion is the same. That religion which lives in every religion obviously is the same in all religions. So and that you realize, I mean, if you think of, as I tried to say in the last remarks that I make about Tagore, Gandhi, and Wittgenstein, they made a distinction between, mystical, awareness of the real. Mystical awareness of the real is something that cannot be articulated, that cannot be talked about. And that is, once you have achieved this, then it is something which is eternal and unchangeable. So mystical awareness is something which is part of religion, which lives in every religion. The true, complete kind of awareness of reality, as it were, beyond the reality of sense perception. And that reality is something which the religious path, the path of religion. For Gandhi, the path of religion is the same as the path of morality, and the path of self-sacrifice and total surrender to faith, to unreason, ungrounded faith, total surrender to it. It takes you to that core of religion, and that core of religion is the same. So this is what, if all religions are in that sense, are same have the same heart, as it were, have the same core. So all religions must therefore be respected. And there's no question of not respecting what is there in every religion. I mean, one religion cannot disrespect another religion because that religion is in heart, in its core, the same as your religion. You respect your religion, you have to respect another religion as well. And this is not the same thing as religious culture. Religious culture, as I said, but Gandhi said that his culture, his religious culture is very dear to him. And of course, he this window thing. He says, he allows winds to come through his window and pass through his house, as it were, and then the religious views that go that as it were floats in the wind. He takes those which he feels good about, and he says, you move on. I don't want to, that sort of thing. So religious culture, in that sense, I can take things from your religious culture, you can take things from my religious culture to enrich your own religious culture. That is not word. But you must recognize that your culture is, therefore, if you can take things from another religion into your religion to enrich your religion, your religion, therefore, is as changeable as my religion. And just as you respect your religion, changeable as it is, you must respect another religion, changeable as it is. Because if you don't respect it, because you see, your religion is just as changeable as my religious culture, is just as changeable as my religious culture. And if I respect my religious culture, then I must respect also another's religious culture. Of course, I have the freedom to criticize it, but I cannot criticize it in a way that that kind of says, your culture is no good, it should be thrown away. That criticism cannot be accepted, because my religious culture is very dear to me. You cannot say something that is so dear to me, I should throw away. You cannot say this. This is exactly what Gandhi said. Hinduism is very dear to me. So therefore, you can't say I should abandon it and take some other form of religious culture. So so Gandhi talked about, he didn't talk about it, but he said, well, religious cultures, of course, they come into contact with one another. They sometimes there is harmonious relationship between them. Sometimes there is not so harmonious relationship between them. There is acrimony between them because of all kinds of other things, because of politics and other kinds of things. But then religious cultures must learn to, this is Gandhi believed, he believed, must learn to live together, must learn to learn from one another, must learn to respect one another in such a way that although one knows that another religious culture can be criticized, you can point out flaws in another religious culture, you cannot advocate the complete condemnation of another religious culture because of the reason that it is something which has flaws. Your religious culture may also have flaws. And if on the basis of that, you reject another religious culture and say that it should not be there at all, then that doesn't allow for a harmonious relationship. So you must have a harmonious relationship between cultures. So he advocated something like a fellowship of all religions. A fellowship of all religions means that religions come together, they live together, they respect each other, and they also communicate with one another with respect and with affection and with without hatred, without violence. And they can discuss one another's views. So that is what is Gandhi's views about religious tolerance, religious respect for different religions. And why is it that every religion must be respected? Why it is because he makes this distinction between the core of a religion and religious culture. So,
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more questions? Or if any participant wants to make any comment regarding the session, they can feel free to do so. Okay, so I think so we are done with the questions. I have two questions from my end. So the first question is regarding that you talked about the relationship of slave and an owner. And in a book which I was reading, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, there is a big segment which was talking about internalization, that the oppressed has the mindset of internalizing the fact that he has to be positioned below the owner. And that internalization is the force which is giving the power to the oppressor. So in this stance, do you think that internalization is a form of coercion and is something of being unfree? And if it is so, then how can we recognize such kind of coercion, given that physical and psychological are still some things which can be easily determined, but internalization is very personal to one individual? And my second question is just that you mentioned that Gandhi was against policy-driven politics. Being a policy student, I just wanted to know that how can we incorporate Gandhian philosophy in while talking about the policy realm as such?
Yeah, well, I think the second question, I tried to answer in some ways. First, internalization is very interesting, and this takes me back to the kind of unfreedom I talked about in the case of the terrorist, the brainwashed terrorist. He's been brainwashed in the sense that he has internalized a position which enables him to treat certain sections of human beings with utter contempt and hatred and deserving of violence. So this is what the terrorists are taught for in whatever way, and they internalize this position within themselves, and they are driven by this internalized position of action. I mean, of motivation of action. Now, this is to a great extent true of the slave as well. Gandhi therefore said that he took the example as an analogy, but he realized that the slave example must be taken with a great deal of caution, because the slave example involves a power relationship between the slave owner and the slave. It is the slave does whatever he does because of the interest-driven action of the master. And he internalizes the master's aims for his actions, the aims for his actions that the master has decided, aims for his action, he internalized them as his own, as it were. That is, to do whatever the master tells him to do. And so this he does. And internalization means it is that inability, that you have internalized something which successfully, means that your inability to question the motivation of his action. You're unable. You say you are driven to do this. You are motivated to do this, and you don't question it. It is like the faithful not questioning his faith. Faithful not questioning his faith in God, if you like. It is very much like that. But then it is a relationship between the master and the slave. It is a power relationship, and it is a relationship that is driven by the self-interest of one person. The self-interest consists in as it were, kind of appropriating the other person totally for your own ends. Now, this kind of appropriation, if you like brainwashing, is a kind of appropriation. This kind of appropriation is obviously cannot be immoral. But he took the example of the slave not questioning, utter unquestioning, ungrounded obedience to the master. That characterizes, according to Gandhi, is the truly moral action. He takes the example of the child, as it were, the spontaneity of the action, the spontaneity of the devotee's devotion to God without without questioning his faith ever. Unquestioning devotion to faith in God. This is the spontaneity of that. So this is the answer to the question about slave. Gandhi himself was aware of this, the oddity of his example. And the other is, what was the other question? Sorry.
So the other question was that that Gandhi did not believe in policy-driven politics.
Yeah. So I did say that the Gandhi was totally. I mean, Gandhi, towards the end of his life, he said the Congress Party for which he worked, the Congress Party must not turn itself into a political party. It must abandon politics. It must not fight election. It must become a party for the well-being of people. So that's what. So modern politics is certainly something that cannot be Gandhian. So people in politics who say they are Gandhian, obviously they are either ignorant of Gandhi or they are just using Gandhi in a hypocritical fashion. That's what I'd say.
But most of the welfare or well-being policies that are currently being made are being made through policy or a course of action. So in that space, what is... is there
that's
any...
okay. The politics has its own place. I mean, there are obviously you have to plan. You have to have a design to follow. You have to have a plan to follow. But you should not can delude yourself into thinking that in doing so, you are being Gandhian. No, you cannot be Gandhian. In doing so, you cannot be Gandhian. So Gandhi, obviously, Gandhi had a very, very very extremely radically different notion of true morality-driven politics, which is that you can have such politics only in a small community, in the village community. He said village community must be the core of political action. Okay.
With this, we reach the end of today's session. I would like to thank Professor Mrinal Miri and Professor Bindu Puri for taking out their time. And we will definitely look forward for your session, ma'am, next week. Thank you, Professor Miri, for enlightening us with your thoughts and for making us understand the relevance of Gandhian thought in terms of morality, freedom, and how the connection between mind and body. Today's talk has also helped us to give a brief snippet of your book, which I believe will be more holistic and thought-provoking to its reader. I would like to thank all the participants for joining the session and for making it more interactive. At the end of the day, I will just wish everyone a good day ahead. Thank you very much.